The silence in the boardroom was heavy, suffocating. But it wasn't the silence of grief. It was the silence of predators waiting to eat. And then, Grant Sterling laughed. It was a cruel, echoing sound that bounced off the mahogany walls. He pointed a manicured finger at the woman sitting in the back corner, shivering in a coat that was 2 sizes too big, clutching a plastic bag. "Security," he barked, wiping a tear of mirth from his eye. "Why is the help sitting at the beneficiary table? Get her out before she stains the upholstery." He thought he had won. He thought the billions were his. But he didn't see the look on the lawyer's face. And he certainly didn't know that the woman he just humiliated was about to destroy his entire world with a single signature. The rain in Seattle didn't just fall. It punished. It hammered against the slate roof of the Pellington Manor, a sprawling Gothic estate that sat on a cliff overlooking the Puget Sound, looking more like a fortress than a home. Inside, the air smelled of beeswax, old paper, and expensive lilies. It was the smell of a funeral, but for Grant Sterling, it smelled like payday. Grant adjusted the cuffs of his bespoke Italian suit. He checked his reflection in the grand hallway mirror. 32 years old, jawline sharp enough to cut glass, and the heir apparent to the Pellington empire. He wasn't blood-related to old Arthur Pellington. Arthur had no children, but Grant had been his protege, his VP, the son he never had. For 10 years, Grant had tolerated the old man's eccentricities, his ramblings about moral fortitude and integrity, all while quietly maneuvering the company toward more ruthless, profitable ventures. Now, the old man was dead. A massive stroke at 89. "Sad business," Grant said to his reflection, practicing the somber look he would need for the cameras later. He flashed a quick, predatory grin. But necessary. He turned and walked toward the great library, where the reading of the last will and testament was scheduled to take place. The room was already filling up with the vultures, as Grant privately called them. There was Beatrice Pellington, Arthur's estranged sister, draped in so much black lace she looked like a Victorian widow, despite not having spoken to Arthur in 20 years. There was Kyle, the distant nephew with a gambling problem and a twitchy eye, already eyeing the antique silverware. And then there were the board members, the sycophants, and the curious hangers-on. Grant breezed past them, nodding politely, shaking hands with the right amount of firm grief. He took his seat at the head of the long oak table, the seat Arthur used to occupy. It was a power move, and he wanted everyone to know it. That was when the heavy oak doors creaked open again. Harrison Cole, Arthur's personal attorney for 40 years, walked in. Cole was a man made of granite and silence. He carried a battered leather briefcase that looked as old as he was. But Cole wasn't alone. Walking a few steps behind him was a woman. She was soaking wet. Her hair, a mousy shade of brown, was plastered to her skull. She wore a beige trench coat that was frayed at the hem and stained with mud around the ankles. Underneath, she wore cheap trousers and worn-out sneakers that squeaked against the pristine parquet floor. She clutched a wet plastic grocery bag to her chest, as if it contained the crown jewels. Grant frowned. He recognized her, but he couldn't quite place from where. Was she a maid? A new cleaner? The woman kept her head down, her shoulders hunched, trying to make herself invisible. She looked towards the row of chairs set up for the staff against the wall, but Harrison Cole gently touched her elbow and guided her toward the main table. The room went silent. Cole pulled out the heavy chair directly opposite Grant, the seat of the primary challenger, and gestured for her to sit. She sat, trembling slightly. She placed the wet plastic bag on the table. A small puddle of rainwater formed around it, threatening the finish of the antique wood. Grant stared. The audacity was breathtaking. "Harrison," Grant said, his voice smooth but carrying a dangerous edge. "I think there's been a mistake. The catering staff is supposed to wait in the kitchen until the proceedings are concluded." Harrison Cole didn't look up from his briefcase. He was arranging documents with agonizing slowness. "There is no mistake, Mr. Sterling." "Then who is this?" Grant gestured vaguely at the wet creature across from him. Did Arthur owe a debt to a homeless shelter? A few of the cousins snickered. Beatrice covered a smile with a lace handkerchief. The woman lifted her head. Her eyes were green, startlingly bright against her pale, tired face. She looked at Grant, and for a second, he saw a flash of recognition. "Hello, Grant," she whispered. Her voice was raspy, like she hadn't used it in days. Grant squinted. The structure of her face, the eyes, It hit him like a physical blow. "Maya?" he asked, incredulous. "Maya Linwood?" She nodded once, looking back down at her hands. Grant leaned back, and a laugh bubbled up from his chest. It started as a chuckle and grew into a full-blown guffaw. He slapped the table. "Maya Linwood? My God, I haven't seen you since." "What? Junior year of college? Before you dropped out?" He turned to the room, performing for his audience. "Everyone, this is Maya. We interned together at the firm a decade ago. She lasted, 3 weeks? Too much pressure? Couldn't handle the heat?" Maya didn't answer. She just stared at the plastic bag. "And now look at you," Grant sneered, his mask of somber grief slipping to reveal the bully beneath. He looked her up and down with undisguised disgust. "You look like you walked here from the gutters. What are you doing here, Maya? Did you come to beg for a handout? Did you hear the old man died and thought you could score a quick $500? "I was invited," Maya said softly. "Invited?" Grant scoffed. Arthur Pellington didn't invite strays to his table. He despised weakness. "And you?" He pointed at her wet coat. "You are the definition of failure. You had potential, Maya. I remember. You were smart, but you had no spine. And now, look at you. You're nothing. Mr. Sterling." Harrison Cole's voice cut through the room like a whip. "That is enough." "It's not enough, Harrison." Grant stood up, his face reddening. "This is an insult to Arthur's memory. I will not have this. This street trash sitting at the table where I built this company." "Security!" 2 large men in dark suits stepped forward from the shadows of the library. "Escort Miss Linwood out," Grant commanded. "Give her $20 for a cab. I'm feeling generous." The guards moved toward Maya. She shrank back into her chair, clutching the bag tighter. "If anyone touches her," Harrison Cole said, his voice dropping an octave, "they will be removed from this property and charged with assault. And you, Mr. Sterling, will be removed from this will entirely." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the rain seemed to stop pounding on the roof. Grant froze. He looked at the lawyer, trying to gauge if he was bluffing. Cole's face was stone. "Sit down, Grant," Cole said. It wasn't a request. Grant slowly lowered himself back into his chair. His heart was hammering against his ribs. Why was the lawyer protecting her? What possible connection could the great Arthur Pellington have with a washed-up dropout like Maya Linwood? "Fine," Grant hissed, adjusting his tie. "Let her stay. Let her see what real success looks like. It might be educational." He glared at Maya. "You're going to regret coming here," his eyes promised. "I'm going to humiliate you so badly you'll wish you stayed in the rain." Maya didn't look at him. She reached into her wet plastic bag and pulled out a small, battered notebook. She placed it on the table. Grant recognized it instantly. It was a cheap, spiraled steno pad, the kind a waiter uses to take orders. Pathetic, Grant thought. Harrison Cole cleared his throat, put on his reading glasses, and broke the seal on the thick envelope in front of him. "I, Arthur James Pellington, being of sound mind and body." The game had begun. The reading of a will is usually a boring affair, filled with legal jargon and tax stipulations. But Arthur Pellington had always been a showman, and his will was his final act. Harrison Cole read for 20 minutes. The room shifted restlessly. "To my sister, Beatrice," Cole read, "who never visited me when I was sick, but always sent a card when she needed money." Beatrice stiffened, her eyes widening. "I leave my collection of porcelain cats. They are brittle, hollow, and gathering dust, much like our relationship." A stifled laugh came from the back of the room. Beatrice gasped, her face turning a furious shade of beet red. "This is an outrage. I demand to contest this." "You can contest it from the hallway, madam," Cole said dryly, "unless you wish to hear the rest." Beatrice clamped her mouth shut. "To my nephew Kyle," Cole continued, "I leave my vintage 1967 Mustang." Kyle pumped his fist. "Yes, the Shelby. However," Cole went on, "the engine has been removed and donated to the local mechanical college. You get the chassis. Perhaps you can push it to your next poker game." Kyle slumped in his chair, looking like he'd been punched in the gut. Grant smirked. This was classic Arthur. Trimming the fat, cutting out the leeches. This only confirmed Grant's theory. Arthur despised greed and incompetence. And Grant? Grant was the machine that kept the billions flowing. Grant was the only one worthy. He looked across the table at Maya. She was staring at the lawyer, her eyes shimmering with tears. She wasn't listening for money. She was listening to the voice of the man she had lost. Fake, Grant thought. She's acting, probably hoping for a pity payout. And now, Cole said, looking up over his glasses, we come to the assets of Pellington Holdings, the estates in New York, London, and Tokyo, and the liquid capital, totaling approximately $4.2 billion. The air left the room. This was it. Grant sat up straighter. He unbuttoned his suit jacket. He prepared his face for the burden of leadership. To Grant Sterling, Cole read. Grant nodded solemnly. He could feel the eyes on him. Yes, look at me, the king, my vice president and shadow for 10 years. Cole paused. He took a sip of water. The pause dragged on for an agonizing 5 seconds. Grant, you are a shark, Cole read, reciting Arthur's own words. You have teeth, you have drive, and you have an appetite that is never satisfied. You took my company, and you tripled its value. For that, the business world applauds you. Grant smiled. It was a eulogy to his brilliance. But, Cole said, the smile froze on Grant's face. But you have a hollow chest, Grant. Somewhere along the way, you forgot that buildings are made of concrete, but homes are made of people. You fired the janitorial staff to save 0.4% on the quarterly budget. You evicted the tenants of the 4th Street block right before Christmas to rush a demolition. You laughed. Grant's hands clenched into fists under the table. Old fool, he thought. I did that for you. To make you richer. I leave you, Cole read, the entirety of my stock portfolio in Sterling Futuristics, the shell company you created to hide your debts. Grant's blood ran cold. The room was silent, but this time, it was a confused silence. Beatrice and Kyle looked at each other. They didn't understand. But Grant understood. He understood perfectly. Sterling Futuristics was his secret. It was where he hid the losses from his bad personal investments. It was illegal. It was fraud. If that came out, and, Cole continued, I leave you a severance package of 2 weeks' pay. Your employment at Pellington Holdings is terminated, effective immediately. Grant stood up so fast his chair toppled over backward with a deafening crash. This is insane, he screamed, his voice cracking. He was senile. I built this company. You can't fire me. I am the company. Sit down, Mr. Sterling, Cole said, his voice ice cold. I am the executor, and I have the evidence of the embezzlement. If you make a scene, the police are waiting in the foyer. Grant stood there, chest heaving, his world fracturing around him. He looked at the faces in the room. Beatrice was smiling. Kyle was grinning. They were enjoying his fall. Who? Grant whispered. If not me. Who? Who gets it? He spun around and pointed a trembling finger at the only other person at the table. Her? He shrieked. The bag lady? You're giving $4 billion to a woman who can't even afford an umbrella? Grant laughed again, but this time it sounded maniacal, bordering on hysteria. This is a joke. It has to be. Maya? Maya Linwood? She's a nobody. She's nothing. Maya slowly stood up. She didn't look like a nobody anymore. She looked tired, yes, but she stood straight. She picked up the cheap, spiral-bound notebook from the table. I'm not nothing, Grant, she said, her voice steady for the first time. I'm his friend. Friend? Grant spat. Arthur didn't have friends. He had subordinates. He had one friend, Maya corrected. And you're right, I did drop out of the internship 10 years ago. Do you know why? Because you were weak, Grant sneered. Because my mother got cancer, Maya said. And I had to work 3 jobs to pay for her chemo. And one of those jobs was the night shift cleaner at this office. Grant blinked. For 7 years, Maya continued. I cleaned your office, Grant. I emptied your trash. I wiped your coffee stains. You never saw me. You walked past me 1,000 times. You looked right through me. So you're the maid, Grant scoffed. Congratulations. You clean toilets. That qualifies you to run a multinational conglomerate? No, Maya said. But listening does. She opened the notebook. Arthur stayed late. Every night, he was lonely. One night, I found him crying in his office. It was the anniversary of his wife's death. You were at a gala, schmoozing investors. I made him tea. We talked. We talked every night for 7 years. She turned the notebook around. It wasn't a waiter's pad. It was filled with handwriting. Arthur's handwriting. Diagrams, business plans, ethical codes, sketches of a future Grant couldn't even imagine. He didn't just leave me the money, Grant, Maya said softly. He left me the mission you abandoned. Harrison Cole cleared his throat again. There is one final condition in the will, a clause that activates only if Mr. Sterling insults Miss Linwood during the reading. Grant felt the blood drain from his face. What? Cole smiled. It was a terrifying smile. The humility clause. Arthur predicted you would judge Maya by her appearance. He predicted you would be cruel. Cole picked up a separate document. Because Grant Sterling displayed arrogance and lack of character, Cole read, the severance package of 2 weeks' pay is hereby revoked. Furthermore, the debt held by Sterling Futuristics is immediately called in by the parent company. Grant, you owe Pellington Holdings $42 million, payable within 30 days. Grant's knees gave out. He collapsed onto the floor, not in the chair, but on the hard, cold wood. He looked up at Maya, the woman he had laughed at, the woman with the wet coat and the plastic bag. Maya, he gasped, his voice trembling. Maya, please, we go way back. You know me. I can help you run this. You need me. Maya looked down at him. She didn't look angry. She just looked disappointed. I don't need a shark, Grant, she said. I need a human being. And you're not there yet. She turned to Harrison Cole. Mr. Cole? I'd like to get started. There's a lot of work to do. Certainly, Miss Pellington, Cole said. Grant's head snapped up. Miss? What? Cole paused at the door. Oh, didn't you know, Grant? Arthur adopted Maya 2 years ago. Legally, she's not just the heir. She's the daughter he finally found. As the heavy doors closed, shutting Grant in with the vultures, the last thing he heard was not laughter. It was the sound of Maya Linwood's wet sneakers squeaking down the hall, walking toward her future. The rain had turned to a biting sleet by the time Grant Sterling was escorted off the Pellington grounds. He stood at the edge of the wrought iron gates, his $5,000 suit drenched, watching the taillights of his own company car fade into the mist. They wouldn't even let him keep the Mercedes. You'll pay for this, Maya, he hissed into the wind. You're a ghost story, and ghosts vanish when the lights come on. Grant didn't go to a hotel. He went to a dark, smoke-filled bar in the underbelly of downtown Seattle, the kind of place where people with too much information and too little conscience gathered. He met with Julian Thorne, a man known in legal circles as the Eraser. Thorne wasn't just a lawyer. He was a specialist in destroying lives through character assassination. She's a maid, Julian, Grant said, slamming a glass of cheap scotch on the scarred wood of the bar. She's a dropout who spent 7 years emptying my trash. Now she's sitting in Arthur's chair. I want her gone. I want the adoption annulled, the will contested, and I want her in handcuffs. Thorne leaned back, his eyes like two cold marbles. A legal adoption is hard to break, Grant, especially if Arthur Pellington signed the papers in front of Harrison Cole. Cole is a dinosaur, but he's a meticulous one. Everyone has a price, Grant snarled. Find out where she was those 7 years. Find the dirt. She was poor, Julian. Poor people do desperate things. Did she steal? Did she lie on her tax returns? Did she have a boyfriend with a record? Thorne smiled. I'll start with the Sterling Futuristics problem first. If we can prove Arthur was mentally incompetent when he discovered your shell company, we can argue the entire will was written under the influence of dementia. And who was the person closest to him during his decline? The maid who was whispering in his ear. Within 48 hours, the narrative began to shift. Maya had spent her first 2 days as the head of Pellington Holdings in a state of shock. She had moved into the guest wing of the manor, the same house she used to clean at 3M. She sat in the massive dining room, eating a bowl of cereal, feeling like an intruder. Then, the morning news hit. The Cinderella scam? Shouted the headline of the Seattle Chronicle. The article, leaked by Thorne, painted a horrific picture. It didn't mention Maya's mother or her hard work. Instead, it suggested that a predatory staff member had isolated an elderly billionaire in his final years, cutting him off from his loyal executives and family. Grant appeared on a primetime interview, looking humble and heartbroken. I loved Arthur like a father, he told the cameras, his voice trembling with practiced emotion. To see his legacy handed over to someone who, well, let's just say she has a very colorful past. It breaks my heart. We are concerned for the company's 10,000 employees. By noon, the Pellington Holdings stock had dropped by 12%. The board of directors, led by a man named Robert Vance, a longtime ally of Grant's, called for an emergency meeting. Maya walked into the boardroom on Wednesday morning wearing a simple black suit she'd bought off the rack. She looked professional, but to the sharks sitting around the table, she looked like a target. Miss Linwood, or should I say, Miss Pellington, Robert Vance began, his voice dripping with condescension. The market has spoken. They don't trust a janitor with a $4 billion portfolio. We are moving for a vote of no confidence to strip you of your voting rights until the litigation regarding the will is settled. Maya looked at the faces around the table. These were the men who had ignored her for years. I have the majority shares, Maya said, her voice small but firm. The will is clear. The will is being contested, Vance countered, sliding a folder across the table. This is a sworn affidavit from a former medical assistant who claims Arthur was suffering from stage 2 Alzheimer's as far back as 3 years ago. If that's true, your adoption is void, your inheritance is void, and you are trespassing. Maya opened the folder. Her heart sank. It was a lie. She knew Arthur had been sharp until his final breath, but the paperwork looked official. Grant had been busy. I need time to review this with Mr. Cole, Maya said. You have no time, Vance snapped. Security is waiting to escort you out of the building. We've also frozen the estate accounts pending the investigation. Maya felt the walls closing in. She was losing before she had even started. She stood up, her legs shaking, and walked out of the room to the sound of hushed, triumphant whispers. Maya retreated to her small apartment. She hadn't turned in the keys yet. She couldn't stay at the manor. The locks had already been changed by the interim management. She sat on her moth-eaten sofa, staring at the notebook Arthur had left her. Maya, Arthur had written in one of the middle pages, they will come for you with lies. They will try to make you believe you are still the girl with the mop. Remember, a crown isn't something they give you. It's something you take because you're the only one who knows how to rule with a heart. Then, she realized she couldn't fight Grant Sterling on his turf. She couldn't out-lawyer Julian Thorne. She had to find the one thing Grant didn't have. The truth. She called the only person she could trust Sarah Miller, her best friend from the days they worked double shifts at the diner. Sarah, Maya said, her voice cracking. I need you to find someone. A nurse named Elena Rossi. She worked the private night shift at the hospital when Arthur had his checkups. Grant's people are using a fake medical report. I need the real one. While Grant was celebrating at a high-end steakhouse, Maya and Sarah were scouring the city. They weren't in boardrooms. They were in the break rooms of hospitals and the back alleys of medical records offices. They found Elena Rossi in a small suburban house, terrified. They told me if I talked, I'd lose my license, Elena whispered, clutching her sweater. Mr. Sterling's man. Thorne. He came to me. He told me to sign a paper saying Mr. Pellington was confused. But he wasn't. He was brilliant. He used to tell me stories about his secret daughter who was going to save his company. Elena, I need you to testify, Maya pleaded. Not for me. For Arthur. I can't, Elena sobbed. They have photos of me. They know where my kids go to school. Maya realized then that this wasn't just a corporate battle. This was a war of terror. That night, as Maya walked back to her car, a dark SUV pulled up beside her. 2 men stepped out. Miss Linwood, one of them said, Mr. Sterling wants to make a deal. Sign over the shares, admit you coerced the old man, and you walk away with $5 million. Enough to live a very comfortable life. Refuse. And we start looking into that accident your mother had 10 years ago. Maya's blood turned to ice. Her mother's death had been a hit and run. The police had never found the driver. What do you know about my mother? Maya whispered. Mr. Sterling knows everything, the man smiled. He's been watching you for a long time, Maya. Even before you knew he existed. The SUV sped off, leaving Maya standing in the dark, trembling. The realization hit her like a lightning bolt. Grant hadn't just met her at the internship. He had been orchestrating things for years. He had seen her potential back then and saw her as a threat to his climb. She wasn't just a maid who got lucky. She was a woman who had been systematically held down by a man who feared her brilliance. The threat about her mother changed everything. It wasn't just about money or a company anymore. It was about blood. Maya sat in the small, cluttered office of Harrison Cole. The old lawyer looked tired. He had been fighting injunctions and restraining orders filed by Grant's team for 3 days straight. "They've blocked access to the main accounts," Cole said, rubbing his temples. "We have the Pellington title, but no liquidity. Grant is bleeding us dry before we even get to court. He knows you can't afford a protracted legal battle." "He mentioned my mother," Maya said, her voice hollow. "He said he's been watching me since before I worked here. Harrison, my mother died in a hit-and-run 10 years ago. It was never solved." Cole froze. He took off his glasses and looked at Maya with a sharpness she hadn't seen before. 10 years ago? That was the year Grant was promoted to junior vice president. That was the year he bought his first sports car. A Porsche 911. Maya's breath hitched. "A black Porsche?" "Yes," Cole whispered. "And 3 weeks after he bought it, he reported it stolen. It was never recovered." The pieces clicked together like the tumblers of a safe. Grant hadn't just been laughing at her poverty in that boardroom. He had been laughing at his own crime. He had killed her mother, gotten away with it, and then watched the daughter of his victim scrub his floors for 7 years. It was a level of psychopathy that made Maya's stomach turn. "We need proof," Maya said, her hands shaking not from fear, but from a rage so cold it burned. "If he reported it stolen, there's a police report. If he fixed it before dumping it, there's a mechanic." "Grant is too careful," Cole warned. "He covers his tracks." "Everyone has a blind spot," Maya said. She reached for Arthur's notebook. "Arthur wrote something here. Page 42. The devil keeps his receipts in the garden." "The garden?" Cole frowned. Arthur hated gardening. "No," Maya realized, her eyes widening. "The garden isn't a place. It's a project. Project Garden. It was a failed urban development scheme Grant tried to launch 5 years ago. It was abandoned, but the shell company still owns the storage facility in the industrial district." "You think he kept the car?" Cole asked, incredulous. "I think he's arrogant," Maya said. "He keeps trophies." That night, Maya didn't act like a CEO. She acted like the invisible woman she had been for 7 years. Dressed in dark clothes, she and Sarah drove to the dilapidated warehouse district on the edge of Seattle. The Project Garden warehouse was a rusting hulk of metal. It was supposed to be empty. But there was a single security camera blinking above the side door. "This is illegal, Maya," Sarah hissed from the driver's seat. "Stealing a company is illegal," Maya said, pulling a crowbar from her bag. "Killing a woman is illegal. This is justice." Maya slipped through a broken window in the back, dropping silently onto the concrete floor. The air smelled of stale oil and dust. The warehouse was mostly empty, filled with rotting lumber and old office chairs. But in the center of the vast space, covered by a heavy canvas tarp, was a shape. Maya approached it slowly, her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She grabbed the corner of the tarp and pulled. Dust billowed up. Underneath sat a black Porsche 911. The front bumper was mangled. The headlight was shattered, and embedded in the grille, preserved by the dry air of the warehouse, was a scrap of blue fabric. Maya gasped, tears flooding her eyes. Her mother had been wearing a blue coat that night. Grant hadn't destroyed the car because he couldn't bear to part with his first symbol of success. He had hidden it, thinking he was untouchable. Maya pulled out her phone and snapped photos. Then, she saw it. On the passenger seat, a stack of files. She opened the door, it was unlocked, and grabbed them. They weren't just car registration papers. They were financial ledgers for Sterling Futuristics. They were emails printed out. Emails between Grant and board member Robert Vance, detailing how they were siphoning Arthur's money. Emails joking about the senile old man. Maya held the smoking gun in her hands. Suddenly, the warehouse lights slammed on. Blinding, white floodlights. "I wondered when you'd figure out the riddle," a voice echoed through the space. Grant Sterling stepped out from the shadows of the office gantry above. He was flanked by 2 security guards and Julian Thorne. "You really are smarter than you look, Maya," Grant called down, his voice smooth and terrible. "Arthur always did love his little puzzles. I should have burned those notes." "You killed her," Maya screamed, holding up the files. "You killed my mother." "It was an accident," Grant shrugged, descending the metal stairs. She walked into the road. I was distracted. A business call. Very important. I couldn't stop. And I certainly couldn't go to jail. I had a destiny, Maya. He reached the ground floor. The guards moved to block the exits. Give me the phone, Maya, Grant said, holding out his hand. And the files. And maybe, just maybe, I won't have you arrested for trespassing and industrial espionage. Maya looked at the exit. Blocked. She looked at Grant. He was smiling that same predatory smile. You think you've won, Maya said softly. I always win, Grant said, because I'm willing to do what is necessary. You? You're just a cleaner. Maya gripped the phone tighter. I'm not just a cleaner, Grant. I'm the owner of this building. Grant laughed. On paper, maybe, but right now, you're just a trespasser. Actually, a deep voice boomed from the darkness of the broken window Maya had entered. The loading bay doors groaned and began to rise. Blue and red lights flooded the warehouse, mixing with the white floodlights. Harrison Cole stepped through the opening, flanked by 4 uniformed police officers and a detective. She's the owner, Cole said, holding up a deed. Which means she gave me permission to bring the police into her property to investigate a cold case. Grant's face went white. He spun around to run, but the back exit was already blocked by 2 more officers. Grant Sterling, the detective announced, walking past the stunned guards. You are under arrest for vehicular manslaughter, obstruction of justice, and corporate fraud. Grant stumbled back, colliding with the dented hood of the Porsche. The trophy he had saved had become his cage. No, Grant screamed, pointing at Maya. She planted it. She's lying. Thorne, do something. Julian Thorne looked at the police, then at the undeniable evidence of the car, then at Grant. He slowly closed his briefcase. I represent you in civil matters, Mr. Sterling. I don't do criminal defense. You're on your own. As the handcuffs clicked around Grant's wrists, he didn't look at the police. He looked at Maya. You're nothing, he spat, even as he was dragged away. You're still nothing. Maya stood next to the car that killed her mother, holding the evidence that saved her father's legacy. I'm the CEO, she whispered. The arrest of Grant Sterling was not the end. It was the beginning of the firestorm. The trial took place 6 months later. It was the most watched event in Seattle's history. The Prince of Pellington versus the Cinderella heir. Grant had hired a team of criminal defense sharks from New York. Their strategy was simple. Deny the car was his, claimed it was stolen before the crash. Claim the files were planted by Maya, and paint Maya as a vengeful, mentally unstable woman who seduced a senile billionaire. The courtroom was packed. Every day, the camera zoomed in on Maya's face. She didn't hide anymore. She wore sharp, tailored suits not to look like a man, but to look like a warrior. Grant's lead attorney, a woman named Victoria Sharp, was brutal. Miss Linwood, Sharp paced in front of the witness stand. Is it not true that you held a grudge against Mr. Sterling for years because he fired you from an internship? I wasn't fired, Maya said calmly. I quit to care for my dying mother. So you say, Sharp countered. But you returned to clean his office. You lurked in the shadows. You envied him. Isn't this entire lawsuit, this entire frame-up with the car, just a pathetic attempt to steal the life you think you deserve? I don't want his life, Maya said. I want justice. Justice? Sharp scoffed. You manipulated a man with dementia into signing a will. Arthur didn't have dementia, Maya said. We have the medical records, Sharp shouted, waving the forged documents. Those records are fake, Maya said. Objection, Sharp yelled. Overruled, the judge said. The witness may answer. It was day 10 of the trial when Harrison Cole called his surprise witness. The prosecution calls Elena Rossi to the stand. A collective gasp went through the courtroom. Grant, sitting at the defense table, went rigid. He whispered furiously to his lawyers. Elena walked in. She looked terrified, but when she saw Maya sitting there, calm and steady, she straightened her spine. Miss Rossi? Cole asked. You were Arthur Pellington's private nurse. Can you tell the court about his mental state? He was sharp as a tack, Elena said clearly into the microphone. He did the New York Times crossword in pen every morning in under 10 minutes. Then why? Cole asked, holding up the defense's medical evidence. Does this report say he had advanced Alzheimer's? Elena took a deep breath. Because Mr. Sterling's associate, Mr. Thorne, told me that if I didn't sign the fake report, my children would have immigration issues. He threatened my family. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel furiously. Order! Order! Grant's face was a mask of fury. He turned to glare at Julian Thorne in the gallery, but Thorne was gone. He had slipped out the back. "One more thing," Cole said. "Did Arthur ever speak about Grant Sterling?" "Yes," Elena said. She looked directly at Grant. "He told me, Grant thinks he is a wolf, but he is just a dog who forgot who holds the leash. One day, Maya will remind him." The jury deliberated for 3 days. The tension in the city was palpable. Was it a corporate coup? Or was it justice? When they returned, Maya stood up. Grant stood up. "In the matter of the People versus Grant Sterling, on the count of vehicular manslaughter, we find the defendant guilty." Grant closed his eyes. "On the count of grand larceny and corporate fraud, guilty. On the count of forgery, guilty." Grant Sterling, the golden boy, slumped into his chair. He didn't scream this time. He just looked small. The judge sentenced him to 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. As the bailiffs led him away, he passed by Maya's table. He stopped for a second. "It should have been me," he whispered. "I was the heir." Maya looked him in the eye. "You were never the heir, Grant. You were just an employee, and you're fired." It had been exactly 365 days since the gavel fell, sealing Grant Sterling's fate behind the concrete walls of a federal penitentiary. In that time, the seasons in Seattle had turned, washing away the grime of the past, and Pellington Manor had undergone a transformation that was nothing short of miraculous. The boardroom of Pellington Holdings, once a cavernous chamber of intimidation where sunlight went to die, was unrecognizable. The heavy, velvet blackout curtains, Grant's preferred method of keeping his subordinates in the dark, both literally and metaphorically, had been ripped down. In their place hung sheer, white linen blinds that diffused the gray Seattle light into a soft, welcoming glow. The air no longer smelled of stale fear and aggressive cologne. It smelled of roasted coffee, fresh rain, and something even rarer in the corporate world: optimism. Maya sat at the head of the long oak table. She wasn't wearing the stiff, armor-like power suits that were expected of a female CEO in a Fortune 500 company. There were no shoulder pads, no restrictive collars, and certainly no 4-inch heels designed to make her look taller than the men in the room. Instead, Maya wore a crisp white blouse, a comfortable gray cardigan, and a pair of dark denim jeans. She didn't need to dress like a predator to command respect. She had learned that true authority didn't come from a tailor, it came from the truth. Around the table sat the new board of directors. The vultures, the sycophants, like Robert Vance, who had chuckled at Grant's cruelty, were gone, swept away in the massive restructuring that the press had dubbed the Pellington Purge. In their seats sat a new breed of advisor. The head of the engineering department, a representative from the local community housing board, the director of HR, who had once been silenced for trying to report harassment, and Harrison Cole, looking 10 years younger despite his age. "Let's look at the Q3 figures," Maya said, her voice calm but carrying effortlessly to the back of the room. Mr. Henderson, the chief financial officer, a man who had initially threatened to resign when Maya took over, stood up. He adjusted his glasses, looking at the spreadsheet on the screen with a mixture of disbelief and awe. "Well," Henderson began, clearing his throat, "I must admit, Miss Pellington, when you proposed the Fair Wages Initiative, I prepared a resignation letter. I thought doubling the salaries of the custodial and support staff would bankrupt our operating margin within 6 months." The room went quiet. Maya leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. And, Henderson smiled, a genuine expression that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "I was wrong. Productivity is up 22%. Employee retention is at an all-time high of 98%. We haven't had a single leak of intellectual property because the staff actually cares about the company now. The market has responded. Our stock is up 15%. A murmur of approval went around the table. "It turns out," Maya said, looking at the faces of her team, "that when you treat people like human beings rather than overhead costs, they work harder. Arthur knew that. He forgot it for a while. We're just remembering for him." She tapped her pen on the agenda. "Next item, the foundation." Harrison Cole shifted in his seat. He opened a thick leather portfolio. "The paperwork is finalized, Maya. The legal team has cleared the name change for the West Wing of the Seattle General Hospital. The Grant Sterling Executive Center is officially no more." The name hung in the air for a moment, a ghost that no longer had the power to haunt them. Grant had built that wing not to help the sick, but to have his name carved in stone. The signage was removed this morning, Cole continued. The new letters are being installed as we speak. Maya swallowed hard, her hand instinctively going to the small silver locket she wore around her neck. And the new name? The Maria Linwood Center for Oncology Research, Cole announced softly. Tears pricked Maya's eyes, hot and sudden. For 10 years, her mother had been a statistic, a hit-and-run victim, a poor woman who died because she couldn't afford better care, leaving a daughter to scrub floors to pay off debts. Now, her name would stand as a beacon of hope for thousands. It was the only monument Maya had ever wanted. She would have said it was too fussy. Maya laughed, wiping her eye. She hated attention, but she would have loved the research grant. It's done, Cole said, closing the folder with a definitive snap. The past is buried, Maya. The meeting adjourned a few minutes later. The board members filed out, shaking Maya's hand, offering ideas, laughing actual laughter, not the nervous tittering that used to echo in these halls. Eventually, only Maya and Harrison Cole remained. The silence that settled over the room wasn't empty. It was peaceful. Maya stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the city. The rain was falling again, washing the glass, blurring the skyline into a watercolor of grays and blues. You did it, Cole said, remaining seated, watching her with a paternal pride. You saved the company. You avenged your mother. You put a monster behind bars. Most people would take a vacation now. Maybe buy an island. I don't need an island, Maya said, her reflection ghosting in the window pane. I have a job. You have a legacy, Cole corrected. Maya turned around, her expression turning serious. She walked back to the head of the table where her bag sat. It was a sturdy, practical leather briefcase now, but inside, she still carried the battered, spiral-bound notebook that Arthur had left her. Harrison, she said slowly, there's one thing left. One loose end. Cole frowned, his bushy eyebrows knitting together. Grant is serving 25 years. His assets have been seized. His reputation is ash. What loose end could there possibly be? Maya reached into the notebook. She bypassed the pages filled with business diagrams and ethical codes. She went to the very back, inside the cardboard cover, where a single, folded piece of yellowed stationery had been taped shut. I found this last night, Maya said. I was looking for a quote Arthur used to say about patience, and I felt a crinkle in the back cover. She slid the letter across the polished oak table. It's addressed to me, Maya whispered. But I think you need to see it to understand. Cole put on his reading glasses. His hands, usually steady as a surgeon's, trembled slightly as he unfolded the paper. He recognized Arthur's handwriting immediately, the sharp, slanted script of a man whose mind moved faster than his pen. Cole began to read, his lips moving silently. Then, he stopped. He looked up at Maya, his eyes wide with shock. Then, he looked back down, reading the rest of the page with a voracious intensity. My dearest Maya, the letter began. If you are reading this, it means you have survived. It means you beat Grant. I knew you would. You have a fire in you that I lost long ago. But I have been a coward, Maya, a terrible old coward. I didn't leave you the company just because you were kind to me. I didn't adopt you just because you were a hard worker who cleaned my office while I cried. I adopted you because 32 years ago, I met a woman named Maria. She was a waitress at the diner where I used to hide from the press. She was the only person who treated me like a man, not a checkbook. We fell in love. But I was married to the business, and to a wife I respected but did not love. I couldn't leave. I was weak. When Maria told me she was pregnant, I panicked. I pushed her away. I sent money, anonymously, for years. I watched you grow up from a distance, Maya. I watched you struggle. I saw you working 3 jobs. I saw you cleaning my own floors. Every time you walked into my office with that mop, I wanted to scream. I wanted to hug you. But the shame was a wall I couldn't climb. I am not just your mentor, Maya. I am your father, your biological father. I waited until death to give you your birthright because I couldn't face you in life. I hope that by saving my company, you can find it in your heart to forgive an old man who loved you from the shadows. Love, Arthur. Harrison Cole placed the letter on the table. The silence in the room was deafening. He knew, Cole whispered, his voice thick with emotion. All those years, I had my suspicions. The way he looked at you. The way he defended you when HR tried to cut the cleaning staff. But I never knew for sure. Maya reached out and touched the letter. She didn't feel anger. Strangely, she felt a sense of completion. The missing piece of the puzzle had finally clicked into place. He watched me scrub his floors, Maya said softly. And he felt guilty every single day. That's why he let me in. That's why he taught me. He was trying to be a father the only way he knew how, through business. Does this change things? Cole asked. Does it taint the gift? Maya shook her head. She smiled, and it was a smile of profound relief. No, it makes it real. I'm not just a lucky stranger, Harrison. I'm not an imposter. I'm a Pellington. I have his blood, I have his stubbornness, and I have my mother's heart. She picked up the notebook and the letter, placing them carefully into her bag. I'm ready now, she said. Ready for what? To run this place. Not as a guest, but as the owner. Maya walked to the door. Cole stood up to follow her, but she signaled for him to take his time. She walked out into the hallway alone. The corridor was long and bright. As she walked, her heels clicked on the parquet floor, a sharp, rhythmic sound of purpose. She passed the executive portraits hanging on the wall. There was Arthur, looking stern, and next to him, a blank space where Grant's picture used to be. Maya paused. I'll put a mirror there, she thought, so everyone who walks by sees themselves, so they remember that they are the company. She turned the corner and nearly bumped into a young man pushing a mop bucket. He froze, his eyes going wide. He was wearing the gray uniform of the facility's staff, the same uniform Maya had worn for 7 years. Oh, I'm sorry, Miss Pellington. The young man stammered, pulling his cart back. I was just trying to finish the baseboards before the lunch rush. Maya stopped. She looked at him. He was young, maybe 22. He had a textbook in the back pocket of his trousers. What's your name? Maya asked. David, ma'am, he said, gripping the mop handle nervously. Nice to meet you, David, Maya said. She looked at the textbook. Introduction to Structural Engineering? David blushed. Yes, ma'am. Night classes. It's a lot of work, but I'm trying. Maya smiled. It was like looking in a time machine. Don't let anyone tell you you're just a janitor, David, Maya said fiercely. This building wouldn't stand without the people who keep it clean. She reached into her bag, pulled out a business card, and handed it to him. If you have ideas about the building, about efficiency, anything, don't just write them in your notebook. You send me an email. Okay? David looked at the card, then at Maya, his jaw slightly open. Really? Really, Maya said. The CEO's office is on the top floor. But the eyes of the company are everywhere. Keep your eyes open, David. She patted him on the shoulder and walked toward the elevator. Maya stepped out of the front doors of Pellington Manor and into the cool, misty air. The rain had stopped. The clouds were breaking, revealing a slice of brilliant, piercing blue sky. She took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the fresh air. She had walked into this building a decade ago with a plastic bag and a broken heart. She was leaving it today as a daughter, a leader, and a survivor. Grant Sterling had laughed at her for having nothing. He had died 1,000 deaths in his cell wondering how she beat him. But the answer was simple. Maya Linwood Pellington didn't just inherit the empire, she was the empire. She buttoned her cardigan, looked up at the sun breaking through the clouds, and began the walk to her car. For the first time in her life, she wasn't running from the past. She was walking toward the future. And that is how the woman who was laughed at for having nothing ended up owning everything. Grant Sterling thought power came from a suit and a sneer. He didn't realize that true power comes from resilience, integrity, and the courage to stand up when everyone else tells you to sit down. He built a fortress of lies, but Maya brought it down with a single notebook and the truth. Justice was served, not just for Maya, but for her mother, and for every person who has ever been overlooked by the arrogant Grant Sterlings of the world. If you enjoyed this story of karma and justice, please hit that like button, it really helps the channel. Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs a reminder that the underdog can win. And subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. What would you have done in Maya's shoes? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.